And hello, everybody. I'm so happy today. So amazing to have Kent Dodds with us, one of the world's best educators, if you ask me. I've learned so much from your courses. And I just want to say thank you so much for jumping in. And we could start it by having you introduce yourself. Maybe some people, I don't know how, might not know who you are, but I just to give some context, I switched careers late in my life. Was like, I need to find some people in the space that I could learn from. And it was just amazing through different webinars you've done, your courses. It really helped me to shape who I am today, and to just be able to have you present and talk about all the cool things you're doing. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I don't know that I need to introduce myself at all. That's like the best compliment or intro that I could get, is that the stuff that I've done has been helpful. But I'll mention just that I'm a full-time educator. I transitioned into that in 2019 after working in industry for a while. And now I just teach people how to build awesome experiences for users. I spent a little bit of time starting Remix. I was there about 10 months to get them off the ground. And once Remix was acquired by Shopify, then I jumped back into full-time educator space. So things that people will know me from: testingjavascript.com, epicreact.dev, epicweb.dev, and epicai.pro, which is my latest focus right now, teaching people how to integrate their services with the AI agents that their users are using.
So I met you at React Conf in Las Vegas recently, and on the stage, you ended up showing a presentation, a little ad by ChatGPT. And I was like intrigued. Why are you showing ads from ChatGPT, and what does this mean for future web dev? So can you kind of set the stage for us?
Yeah. So my talk at React Conf was titled "React Router's Take on React Server Components." And it's a great talk. I actually just recorded my own version of that and put it up on epicreact.dev, so folks can go take a look at that if that sounds interesting to them. But yeah, and I did update my demo to the latest version of React Server Components to avoid some critical vulnerabilities. But at the end of it, or the thing is, like, since March, I pivoted my focus. That's not to say that I no longer care about React or anything. Like, it's all still very relevant for the vast majority of web developers. But I do feel like things are moving in a direction, and I'm kind of skating where the puck is going. And so when I was invited to speak, I said, hey, listen, I kind of want to, like, my focus is all on AI. And they said, well, we've got lots of stuff on AI. Could you at least talk about React? And so I did. And so like, here it is, React Router with React Server Components. But like, I'm still going to be a little self-serving. I've got a little bit of time on the stage. I'm going to talk about the shift that I see happening in the space. And that shift is that users are fleeing the browser and moving to AI agents. I definitely still do like your traditional search on the web. I use combination of DuckDuckGo and Brave search. I don't even know which one I'm actively using right now. Like, they're all basically the same to me, because most of the time, rather than a search, I'm going to open up a ChatGPT prompt, because lots of the time it's not just help me find this thing, it's help me answer this question. And so I'm like, ChatGPT does a really good job of that. It can do the searching and it can find the answer. And what's interesting about this is you can actually witness this sort of transition happening on both sides. So ChatGPT is becoming more and more like solving the problems that browsers do, and browsers are becoming more and more solving, like, getting into the AI answering questions space. And so on Google and Bing, or I don't know about Bing, I don't ever use Bing, but Brave, and I don't know about DuckDuckGo yet, but they're doing those AI generated responses to your queries. And yeah, like, to varying levels of success. But when Google started, there was varying level of success in finding the answer to your question in the first place as well. So the basic idea is that technology companies, or just companies that are successful, are striving to serve their users better than their competitors, so that their users stay with them. And it turns out that using AI to answer users' questions, to help them solve the problems that they have, is a better user experience than like requiring the users to know the right keywords to enter into their search to find what they want, and then to go around to the different website responses, find the information, or perform the task that they want. It's better than like going and logging into an app to solve a problem and figuring out their interface and using it to solve the problem. You just tell the AI what you want to have it do, and it does the thing. And so what I showed in my talk was, yes, it was an ad, or like not really an ad, like more, it was a promo video for an upcoming feature in ChatGPT called ChatGPT Apps. Basic idea is that instead of going to a particular site to go and interact with it and figure out the interface, you just tell the AI what you want it to do. It determines what app is most appropriate to respond to that, and then it will show that app right in the chat experience, and in various different form factors. It can be just like a little widget, or it can fill the whole screen, and then you can chat with it back and forth. And then you can, of course, it's interactive as well. So you can like use your mouse, use your keyboard, interact with the app. And so you have this multimodal input, you have this multimodal output, and whatever mode makes the most sense for whatever you're trying to do, that is what you use. And so that is the basic idea. Was it like a minute-long video just showing this feature? And the reason that I showed it is because since March, I've been trying to help people understand that this is the new user interaction model, where things are going, where the primary interface for your applications in the future will be through these AI agents. And yes, there will be some graphical and visual components to it that the end user is actively working with. So the front end is still relevant here, but a lot of it is going to just be having different tools that you define to accomplish certain tasks. And in that realm, you're not interacting with the user at all. You're interacting with their agent. And the agent is the one that's saying, on behalf of the user, I am doing this thing. And so exposing your app's capabilities to the agent so that it can serve as an agent for the user. That's the new interaction model that we're steadily moving towards since MCP was released a year ago.
Yeah, I think the crazy part is, like, I actually didn't realize, because you do it so much and it's so easy. You just chat GPT everything. I don't remember last time I used Google. And when you showed that video, I was like, oh my God, I'm literally that use case of folks, how they interact with the tools and searching the web. And honestly, like, I got freaked out a little bit, because I was like, if you don't have an app that has that capability to interact with those different models and be living directly in ChatGPT or Claude, and you give the ability to engage with your content that way, like, I literally feel you're going to be left behind. Like, is that like the sense of feeling you have?
Yeah, like I see this as very, very similar to the beginnings of the web. And like, to be clear, around like 1995, I was 7 years old. So like, this is the beginnings of the web was wee lad at that time. So, but from my perception is, in the early days of the web, a lot of people needed to be convinced that they needed a presence on the internet. And I would say, I would argue that there's actually still some businesses that can survive just by like word of mouth in their local area, and everything will be fine for them. But the vast majority of them are going to have an internet presence. Like, even the oil changing, like mechanical car company, whatever, I don't know what they're called, but like, you would think that, oh, this is like cars were local, whatever, but no, they have a website. Like, everybody has a website. They have a web presence. And I think that right now, a lot of people are saying, okay, give me an argument for why my service needs to be hooked up to an agent. And honestly, they're not asking that question because they don't understand MCP. They're just saying, like, why does my site need an MCP server? And most people are thinking, isn't MCP just for developers in an IDE? Like, isn't that what it's for? So like, I build a service that connects dog sitters with dog owners. Like, so why do I need to worry about connecting to an agent? Because developers don't necessarily, like, they're not my target audience. But that's the problem, is that right now, the agents that make the most use of MCP are developer focused. And so most of the servers are developer focused. But we are steadily getting to a place where general purpose agents are supporting MCP. And that means the 800 million weekly users that ChatGPT has now have this new way to interface with services. And if your competitors are there and you are not, then yeah, I think you will get left behind. It'll be very similar to just not having a website in the year 2010. It's just like, are you kidding? Like, what are you doing? So we'll get there, and we'll get there pretty fast, because even though AI agents can technically browse the web and find different things and even like direct the user to your website, and that will be a nice bridge for us. After a while, like that's pretty inefficient, and the AI agent is just trying to serve the user the best it possibly can, so the user doesn't go to another agent. And as a result, the agent is going to provide the user with the most integrated experience possible. And so if you do not have a presence in the MCP server space where the agent can integrate directly with your service, then they're going to use a different service that does. So there are definitely some categories of apps that don't, like, it's not so existential for them to whether they have an MCP server support or that direct agent integration. But even for those people, they can provide a better user experience for their users by having that level of integration. I could talk about that for length, like how that improves the user experience. But that's my basic thoughts on like the existential crisis facing anybody who decides to ignore this.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Another thing that I noticed, that I feel like UI is still going to be integral part, but there's going to be a difference between like static UI, like your typical website, or UI generated dynamically based on what the user is asking. Do you think that's actually that's something I started to think about it, but in your mind, do you think that's the trend that we're also going to head into, where you might have MCP that will, you ask a question and it'll generate UI based on what the user is looking for?
Yeah, I do think that in the maybe a little bit more distant future, the LLM will generate UI on demand. So I think we're like a ways out from that with the limited exposure to this space that I have. So I do think that like custom UI development will remain very relevant for at least the next 5 years. But yeah, don't ask me to guess anything beyond that. Even 5 years is like, oh, I don't know. 5 years ago, we didn't have ChatGPT. So like, who knows? But yeah, I think that building out, and by static, just like static assets, not static data, right? Like so the data is going to feed into these components that you are building yourself. And I think that will remain relevant for the foreseeable future. What I would like to have happen is you have, so let's take a step back. One of the reasons why having static assets is useful and like building out a custom UI is useful is for branding purposes. You want, like, if I ask my agent, hey, I need a ride to the airport, if I'm Uber, I want to make sure that the customer knows that it's an Uber picking them up, not a Lyft, right? So like that branding actually really matters. And maybe for myself as well, I want to have this security knowing that I'm, this is an Uber versus like some random person's car service that I don't necessarily trust. So being able to build like custom components and have those be displayed, I think is important. But what I think would make a lot of sense is if a server developer could create a library of components and give that to the agent, and then the agent composes those together in a way that makes the most sense for the user at the time. And that, I think, is something that is definitely possible. In fact, a friend of mine put together a demo that effectively does this. So whether that becomes like a common thing or not remains to be seen. But yeah, looking forward to how things shape up in that realm.
But speaking about just like the future and where we're heading with web development as a journey in general, like you've been in this industry for a long time, so you have a really good opinion. There's new developers coming in and they have this fear that AI is going to replace everybody and it's going to be the end. But then on the other side, there's still a lot of developers who are very optimistic about this field, even with all the tools that AI is enabling them to have.
Yeah, so let's address that in this way. So let's just pretend for a moment that this is going to happen and AI is going to take over everything. And let's say that that's happening next year. Okay. So what would you do to prepare? Let's assume, okay, we know this is happening in 1 year. What do you do to prepare for that eventuality? Literally nothing. There's nothing you can do to prepare for that. There's just no way. Like there's no skill you can acquire. There is no amount of wealth you could acquire. Nothing matters, because once that happens, then it's all over, right? So given that, and the fact that it's actually not going to happen in a year, maybe it happens in 50 years, who knows, but there's no way for us to really know. Because of that, let's just eliminate that off the table of things to be worried about or plans to be made, because you cannot plan that. You can't do anything about it anyway. So let's just pretend that there's no way that'll happen. Now, what are we left with? Well, we're left with an AI that can really help us to as a tool to accomplish the tasks that we accomplish. Okay, so what can I do to prepare for that? Well, I guess I could get really good at using and integrating AI into my workflow and as part of my service offering. Okay, great. And I know that sounds a bit like a pitch for my course on epicai.pro, but that is why I'm working on Epic AI Pro, because I think that is how we future-proof ourselves, is figuring out how to integrate with these AI assistants. Eventually, I'll probably do some material on how to use AI assistants more effectively in your software development. But right now, I'm focused on how do I take the service I already have, or even a new service I'm building, and make that integrate with the AI assistant that my users are already using. So here, just the other day, my sister asked me to help her build a chatbot for her Salesforce, because apparently Salesforce has a chatbot, but it's way expensive. And so I'm talking through things with her, and she's using Replit. And she was talking to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT recommended using Replit. And then she just said, what do I do now? What do I do now? And she just got stuck. And it's funny because Replit CEO is one of the people who keeps on saying developers are going to be gone in a year. They're going to be gone in 6 months. And that was 2 years ago. What's interesting is that it's just she got stuck. She couldn't progress. She couldn't proceed with what she was trying to do because the tools just aren't there. And maybe they'll get there eventually, but they keep telling us that it's going to happen. And I don't think that it is. I think that developers are always going to be relevant. Maybe we won't need as many because they'll be more efficient or whatever. Or maybe we as a society will just accomplish more because this enabling tool. I'm a lot more optimistic, even more optimistic than I was a year ago, that we are going to be fine. We're going to continue to remain relevant. But it's just really important that we learn both how to use the tool to improve the output that we create, as well as integrate with the tool to improve the output that our users create.
Yeah, that's a great point. One thing that I noticed coding with AI is that it may help you to write things faster, where you're not manually typing things. You the code, you still need to understand the deeper concepts, because you could code just if you have no idea what you're doing, you could prompt code 40, 50, 60, let's say 80%, but the last 20% is going to kill you. It's not going to you're not going to be able to deploy that app. And what I found out, I did this small experiment. I created a 3JS, pretty substantial game using Cloud Code. And I was so impressed with myself. But then I realized is that because I'm a developer, I know exactly what to look for. And when I get stuck, I do the additional research. I had to create some optimization for the 3D graphics because it was running really slow. And the skill that I needed to have, basically problem solving, being able to understand the problem that I'm trying to solve, and being able to provide additional context to the LLMs to actually be able to solve it. And sometimes literally solving yourself is going to be that most important skills. And so this idea you have local development, they'll never, in my mind, it's a certain subset of apps that someone's going to be able to build, but it's not going to be web development or engineering like we do today. And so for me, the more I use these LLM tools, I'm excited, but I'm also more optimistic about what it means to be a software engineer And for me, the skills that I find that are becoming more important is like problem solving, troubleshooting, debugging, and being able to think about your problems clearly so you could kind of reason about them, even if it's one LLM. And one of the tricks I've been doing is like try to talk to the LLM as if you would with another engineer. So that way you're practicing that same skill set that you would as an engineer. And so with that being said, in your life, how do you use it? Like before we talk a little bit more in depth about MCPs and your thoughts about it, how are you using AI in your development journey right now?
I probably use it too much because like sometimes, yeah, I really know the answer to this. Like give me 30 seconds to think about it. I could solve this problem myself. But I prompt most of the things that I do. I use Cursor. I do still like the editor mode over the agent mode. I like to be able to like look at the files, and this is probably just me being, stuck in my ways, I guess. Yeah, I like being able to edit the files. I actually see the code that I have written as a part of the prompt, which it actually is. It's part of the context. And so if the result that I get from the LLM is wrong, then the right answer is to improve the code so that the LLM sees what you're trying to do more clearly. Of course, there's a lot to do with prompting, and especially if you're doing something a little bit more greenfield and you want to prompt your way to victory, for a vibe coded, like a pseudo vibe coded app or whatever, then there's a lot more effort you need to put into the words you use to describe what you're doing. But I find that actually typing lots of the code still is really valuable. It's just a part of that prompting experience, and especially if you've got an established code base with established patterns and practices, getting it to throw in a feature here and there can be a prompt that's just like 3 or 4 sentences long, because you have these established patterns and practices, and the existing code is part of the prompt. And so yeah, I sometimes find myself, pulling that slot machine thing a little bit, like, okay, one more prompt and it's going to fix it. Whenever I do that, like, that's the moment that, okay, I really should just take a step back, think about this a little bit more, and maybe write some of that code myself. So anyway, I also use ChatGPT quite a lot to think through ideas. Sometimes it's nice to step back from the context of the code base. And so that like ChatGPT not seeing my files is kind of a feature in that sense. And so for myself, I pretty much use a combination of ChatGPT and Cursor. I do have subscriptions for others, but those are my primary LLMs.
Yeah, and to your point of having established pattern and like types, I think really helps to guide the LLM. And what I find is that that's probably the best use case, is where you establish the patterns of things that you want and you know how they're going to be, and then you kind of use LLMs to help you to move fast. And I find that if you start with a fresh idea and you just try to vibe code, because there's that statistical kind of way it's guessing or trying to prompt what it thinks the code should be, I find it that sometimes they'll give you an answer, and then when you prompt, it will go back and rewrite 3 different files because it's like, oh, I decided to do it differently. And I think that's the part that I think is hard for me to think about, is that, it's not as probabilistic as or deterministic, I should say. It is probabilistic, but it's not as deterministic as I want it to be. And so I find it's like finding that balance, you as a developer being able to guide it to produce the results that you want. And I think just because of that nature, I think you're always going to need a developer in the loop. Is that something you notice too? Is that sometimes it just like goes off the rails and you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And a lot of the challenge, of course, is knowing what context to include and what context to exclude. MCP actually can help with that a little bit as well.
So let's jump right into it. In your words, I know we've kind of set the stage. What are the use cases that you find that you've used in your own kind of personal life for MCPs, and talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So first I'll start this by saying that I do use MCP quite a bit in my regular development, but my focus is more on the building of MCP servers. And really my focus in general has been on the consumer side. I do plenty of enterprise stuff, like people who are in enterprises are using my educational material and stuff. But what I decide to focus on is, what would I need to learn and need to do if I were still working as an individual contributor at a company. And the last company I was at was PayPal. So like, what would I need if I was still working over there at PayPal? And that's where I got myself into MCP. Thought, well, if I were at PayPal, I'd definitely want to be getting into MCP and exposing the services at PayPal to agents that my users are using, which they have. They are actually a really early adopter of MCP. Because of that, most of my focus has been on consumer sort of MCP, like building MCP servers for consumers. And the general purpose agents, their support for MCP is still very experimental. So we're still kind of waiting for that to show up. Right now in ChatGPT, it's in developer preview. Of course, it's in Claude, but the experience isn't all that great. But they've committed to improving that in like the coming months. It's going to be really awesome. But anyway, with all that mentioned, one of the MCP servers that I use the most is Context 7. That is there are a couple of servers that do this, but effectively, when you ask to work with some particular library or something, the LLM is limited to the knowledge that it was trained on. And so if it was trained on an old version of Zod, for example, then it's going to be using those like antiquated techniques and APIs and stuff. And so Context 7 is an MCP server that the LLM can use to retrieve the latest version of the docs, or at least the version that you have installed. And then the LLM knows, oh, okay, so this is how you do that. So that is probably my most used MCP server. I used to use the Playwright MCP server for a lot of things, but now Cursor has a built-in browser mode, which is like phenomenal. So I have found myself using that quite a bit less since that. And but I'm mostly interested in building MCP servers for consumers, and that's what I'm excited about being able to use as well. Once the consumer or general purpose agents are built out and have good MCP server support, I've got a lot of servers that I'm excited to use.
Yeah, I know you had an example project. I think it's Epic Me MCP. Can you talk a little bit about and like what was the motivation to creating it? Like, I guess it's as an example to show what our possible like use cases can be from the consumer standpoint, I guess.
Yeah. So the Epic Me MCP server is a journaling app. It allows you to record journal entries. It's got tag support and authentication and all of that. So the motivation behind that is actually for my workshop series. That's the app that we build as we go through the workshops together. And yeah, it's just explores all of the features of MCP that you can go through and you can use it. You could use it to journal. There's no terms of service, so your journal could disappear at any time. It is deployed on Cloudflare. Has authorization built in with OAuth. I actually really look forward to the day where I can just grab my phone and say, "Hey, ChatGPT, this is what my day was like," or really just like, I want to write a journal entry, and then it just talks to me and like goes back and forth. Tell me about your day. What happened? What did you think about that? And then it writes the journal entry for me and sticks it into Epic Me MCP. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's like really awesome is all these like future potential of things you could do. So I know we're like still kind of in this exploratory phase of, you know, when to use MCPs, are they widely supported? But I think like that's the direction we're heading. And I think it's important to set part of your time to experiment with these new ways of interacting with the web. I know in the past, like creating some LLM powered apps, like I would use SDKs that would have like specific like way to call tools, but it like seemed like you have to code a lot of that stuff yourself, where with MCP it seems like you just expose the tools and then, you know, it feels like a more flexible approach in terms of like creating AI powered apps.
Yes, absolutely. So like I actually wrote about this a couple months ago. I titled it "Stop Making LLM Wrappers." For the last 3 years, people have been saying, wow, ChatGPT is so awesome. I wish that it knew everything that you can do in my company. And so they would build a chatbot that had this retrieval augmented generation, this RAG thing that could, based on the user's query, perform a vector search on their knowledge base and then stick that in the context, send that to OpenAI, and then the response comes back. So it effectively is just like, you can do this yourself with chatgpt.com. You have a question, so you go to the knowledge base, you find all the documents that are relevant to that question, you put it into ChatGPT along with your question, and it gives you the response. That's what people are building. They're making it so you don't have to go to the knowledge base yourself. It retrieves that for you. And there are a bunch of problems with this. One of them is that when you build your own chat app, you only have access to the things that are in the knowledge base that you have yourself. Whereas in ChatGPT, if you have an MCP server connected, or Claude or whatever, Gemini, whatever, in an agent that supports MCP, you could expose your knowledge base as an MCP server. And then ChatGPT has access to your knowledge base, but also everything else that it has access to. It can do web searches, it can use other MCP servers, take that all together, and then answer the user's query. So the real power there is its ability to just aggregate all of the different sources that are relevant to the user's query. And so by building your own wrapper, yes, you can make it capable of talking to your service, but that's all that it can do. It doesn't have memory. It doesn't know who the user is. It doesn't know what their goals are, any of that stuff. That's why I wrote that article, because you cannot possibly make it any better than ChatGPT with an MCP server that gives that thing access to everything that you would give your chat bot access to.
It's a very interesting point you're making, because there's a lot of folks that I talk to that have this next idea. They're going to build this AI app, and then when you dive a little bit deeper, it's like a wrapper for using a model that already exists. And so I'm like, well, what kind of moat do you really have? And like, instead of embracing, like trying to create this thing that you just literally, like you said, like a wrapper, it's like, why not just kind of embrace the change and create more native like integrations using MCPs. And that way, if they change something, you benefit from that right away. And I guess like one thing and concern that, not sure if you like thought about it, but people always think like, oh, it's a third-party service. I want to be very concerned about privacy. And, you know, have you thought about like, with what you learn about MCPs, like how to think about it? Or
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mentioned that in my article as well. Like, there are a couple of reasons where you'd still build a wrapper. One of them is that, like, if you just really don't want to trust ChatGPT with that, then like also please make sure that you're not using OpenAI like through the APIs, because it's exactly the same thing. So if you really are concerned about that, you need to be running your own model, and that's like the only way to be like feel actually safe about not sharing your stuff. And if you're like, no, I don't want to run my own model, well, then you are sharing all of your data with those providers, and you're subject to their terms of service and privacy policy. So, but another reason is the MCP support in ChatGPT right now is still behind developer preview, or a lot of it is. And so unless you're a special company, like there are some companies that actually have MCP apps built into ChatGPT, and they don't have to enable developer preview or whatever. They're just rolling this out slowly. Like the goal is to eventually make it so that you can just ask ChatGPT a question. It will find us the server most relevant to answering it. So you won't have to like install it or anything. But anyway, yeah, if you have like some serious privacy concerns, or you need something right now, then yeah, an LLM wrapper is good. But here's the thing. How are you going to provide that context to the LLM? What if you make an MCP server and you have your own chatbot that just connects to the MCP server? So here's what's cool about that. I need to build my own chatbot because I need it today, and I can't put it into ChatGPT because developer preview. So make your own chatbot, but then connect it to your service via MCP. So when it does eventually show up in ChatGPT and everybody can use it, you just take that same MCP server and now you expose it to ChatGPT. So you can still use MCP even on your own chatbots. And so that's how I would recommend people build those things now, is by using MCP. And there's actually a really cool project that does exactly this. It's called Nanobot, and it allows you to just build a chatbot that you then hook up your MCP server, and now you've got a chatbot that is like specific to your service. It actually exposes itself as an MCP server. And so you can actually, you can make your own chatbot, and you could even go like really deep on that integration. Make sure that user experience is exactly what you want it to be, especially useful if you're a bank or something like that, very sensitive information. You have this chatbot, users can use that, but then you decide you want to connect it to ChatGPT or something. You just expose that chatbot as an MCP server. I say, hey, I need to transfer $500 to pay my rent or whatever. And the agent says, oh, cool, I've got this other MCP tool that says chat with your bank. So I'll go tell the bank what I need to have happen. And then the bank is also a chatbot, and it interprets that to understand what the user is actually trying to do. And then it can go off and do it all internal on its own system. And so like it gives a whole new meaning to the phrase, like, I'll have your people call my people, or whatever, where the agent is the people. And I think that is a pretty interesting, and actually probably going to be a pretty common way to do this is, okay, we want to have a lot more control over the experience. We're going to build our own chatbot, but then we can expose that chatbot so that agents can chat with it. That's agent-to-agent communication right there.
Yeah, exactly. And I was kind of thinking a little bit about it because I've done some like custom like apps with custom regs using a local LLM, just exploring this whole idea of privacy concern. And I think you could probably have both. You could have, your own personal thing that you do, running your own model, private. And then you could have the public facing, like the ChatGPT, all the other stuff. And you could have different MCPs, like middleware, almost like in the middle, kind of being like communicating. And, that way for certain tasks, okay, we need more publicly like available. We don't care about privacy. And then you could have internal tools and calling. And then MCP and different agents would basically be the glue that communicate based on what you're asking.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think actually this will be a really common way to do that, and a good way to help with the privacy concerns as well, because you can build your own agent that says, okay, never share this information in through chat or whatever. You can do stuff like, here are the things that you can do. Never share this extra information or whatever, or you just don't expose that information, I guess. But it just gives you a lot more control over that experience.
Nice. And just because you've been exploring MCPs, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of folks, do you have some misconceptions that people have or pushback that people give?
There are a couple of common criticisms. One of them is that MCP doesn't have auth, which is just like so false. But I hate to even mention it, but like it's a common enough misconception that like, well, the only way to authenticate your MCP server is to put a token on like in a .env file or something. Like that is so wrong. Like it's all the way back in March had OAuth support. And now, like back in March, your MCP server had to be the OAuth server, and that was a huge pain. Still possible. The Epic Me MCP server was built that way, and I don't feel like I'm especially smart. I just I did the work, and now we've got OAuth support. But then later in June or July, a new version of the spec was released that made the MCP server the resource server, which makes it way, way easier. So now you've got this third-party service that can be the OAuth server, or you can like if you're at a company that already has OAuth, then you can have your authorization server. And then being the resource server is way easier. And then actually just in November, further improvement was made to that to make it more secure and easier to build auth as well. And I had a baby at the end of October. Well, my wife did. And so I haven't actually had a whole lot of time to do much updating. So I can actually speak to what exactly was involved in some of those changes, why it made it so much easier. But like they are very clearly thinking about this and making that sort of thing easier. So auth is, I wouldn't say it's a solved problem, but it is a solved problem, and it's only going to get easier. Another criticism is, well, I can just use a CLI instead of MCP. Like the agent already knows how to use a CLI. Why do I need an MCP server? Especially like with GitHub. GitHub has a great CLI. Why can't we just use the CLI? And my response to that is like, if you're happy using the CLI for GitHub, that's great. Like, I don't care. I'm focused on consumers. They're not going to have a CLI. Most of the use of MCP will be on this device in the future, like in the very near future, and it will be through voice. I'm very confident that the vast majority of MCP usage in the next year is going to be on mobile phones, and lots of that is going to be through voice. And so I don't need yeah, okay, sure. Go ahead and use a CLI for your developer stuff. You are so missing the point here. That this is so much bigger than what you can do in a CLI. And then taking that further, CLI is a non-standard interface. Like, okay, yeah, so like command, flags, arguments, whatever. That's the interface. That's a whole thing. It's just those things. Okay, some CLIs have a -- help. Great. So you're gonna have your agent run the help command every single time it needs to know what it's going to do. Or you can use the standard MCP tool definition, and the agent already knows everything that it can do with your MCP server, or like all the tools. Like one of those things sounds more efficient than the other. And like there's just so much power in having a standard that agents can then optimize for. And they're actively optimizing for it. There was a blog post recently by Anthropic about code generation. And instead of having the tool definition and just like sending all of that to as part of the context and wasting a lot of that context window, you instead have like a really trimmed down version of that. Or in fact, later they posted another blog post about tool search, which I predicted that. I said this was going to happen months ago, and it is happening. But basically you have the query, and then there's an agent or something else that's responsible for taking that query and finding the most relevant tools. And then you take those and include those in the context. But anyway, this code generation thing can generate the code for interacting with all of those tools. And some people saw that and said, look, that's they're saying that MCP is garbage. And I'm saying, no, they are using MCP to make this possible. And the only reason that it works is because it's a standard. I don't care, like if you think that the model context protocol is a trash protocol because of this, and this, I'm sorry. A lot of people say that JavaScript is a trash language because this, and this. But here's the fact of the matter. It's everywhere. It's the standard. Everybody's using it. So stop crying like a baby and jump in and make it better. However, but the fact is that everybody has decided this is the standard. So we have to live with it. We got to deal with it. I actually think it's fine. I think like there are certainly warts and those things can be improved. There's no cracks in the foundation. And so we can build on top of this and make this thing better. And so the fact that agents are saying, hey, we're going to change the way that we use MCP is not like a nail in the coffin for MCP. It's actually like validation that we've left the phase of make it work and we've entered the phase of make it right and make it fast. And we're starting to optimize this thing. So I'm actually thrilled to see this sort of thing. So some people complain about that. There are a couple other smaller complaints that people have, but most of them are just missing the vision of what this could be, that it's way more than just like a developer tool. And it's actually going to be a huge thing in the way that users interact with our services.
Yeah, and to me, that like just the way, like I said at the beginning of the call, I forget to like kind of see that my whole interaction with the web has changed, and a lot of it is through these chatbots. And if it has voice capability, right, on my phone, I literally talk to my phone like a crazy person these days. And I think having those tools available in those platforms, I think if people are not doing it, I really think I'm missing out. So the way I look at it is like, let's say you're 100% like wrong, right? And I just wasted like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours, 10 hours going through, by the way, your amazing course. And I'll put it in the link in just a second, learning about MCPs. But what if you're like 10% right? Then all of that has been worth it. And I think like, as the web is shifting, as things are moving fast, I think it's important to explore these new ways. I feel like you'll have so much to gain if you're like on top of these new things and new changes. Like the whole point is like, as developers, I feel for me, it's like, how do I stay relevant? And it's figuring out what are the trends. You might be right, you might be wrong, but doing nothing, I think, is going to hurt you. And so like, I'm excited kind of like seeing you pushing MCPs and all the work that you're doing from the educational standpoint and sharing with the community to kind of help to motivate people to try those things. And so very, very, very excited. So I know we're getting to the close, 9 minutes. If someone were to wanted to learn about MCP besides your amazing course, like what are the path that you would recommend for someone?
Well, the path that I took was to read the spec first. That is definitely something that's worth your time. It's relatively readable. There's a lot of uppercase must, should, and may in there, but it's a relatively readable spec. So model context protocol dot, where is it? Dot something. Just Google it or whatever, or ask ChatGPT for it. Yeah, so I would read through that. And there are some good blog posts and articles on there as well. Epic AI, I have written a bunch of posts on there too, to kind of, and lots of videos as well that you can watch to kind of get a lay of the land and open your mind on what possibilities there are there. I actually am unaware of any other course that goes to the level of depth that mine goes to. That was one of the bets that I made early on back in March when I decided to jump on this. It's a bet for the future, and I want to be known as the instructor for MCP. And so I'm unaware of any other courses that go through MCP like Epic AI Pro. So that's where I would direct people.
Yeah, and I'm taking the course. It's amazing. A lot of great sections. And like you said, people don't have to get your course, but I personally would recommend it. What's another like strategy that I do, for instance, we have one of our community members build a MCP plugin for Strapi. And what's awesome, a lot of these projects are open source. And so you could literally look at the code and see how people implementing things. So read the specs, do Epic AI Pro, or just look at the code of what people actually building and experiment. And what's cool about it is that you're able to like expose these different tools. And so here I am like using my connection for my app timeout, but just the example here, I'm in Claude, right? Able to interact with my Strapi instance using conversational words and get the data. I think that's the future, the ability to expose your applications or parts of it to be able to, for users to kind of be able to interact in a way that feels comfortable, exactly like we've been doing with ChatGPT and other LLMs. I think like this is definitely not something to sleep on. And before we end this stream, I do want to thank you, Kent, for everything you're doing. You've been amazing inspiration for me personally. I'm sure a lot of other people. And so as your last parting, like kind of wisdom, if you were to impart on the folks that tune in today, what would it be?
Yeah, okay. So I just posted a couple of links of some people who are doing some really awesome things with MCP. So give all those folks a follow. In particular, the Adam just put together a whole bunch of really awesome MCP servers. So if you want to look at like implementation of somebody who he not only builds the servers, but also a really good client, a really good agent. So take a look at his stuff. As far as my parting words, I would just say like be optimistic because even if we're wrong and the AI is going to eat us all, there's nothing you can do to prepare for that anyway. So just forget about that. Don't even worry about it. Don't think about it. It doesn't like there's no possible action that you could take to make that better. So pretend that doesn't exist and go forward with optimism, and things are going to be great. It really, I'm very, very confident that things are going to be awesome, and developing skills on integrating with and using AI, I think the version of you will be better than the version of you who does not do that. So have fun.
100% well said. Thanks, Kent, and thanks everybody for joining. And I'll also repost this on YouTube for folks that missed it, but really awesome hang out with everybody. And thanks a lot. And thank you, Kent, for your time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.